A never-ending city of iron. Its walls burn and melt skin. Its sewer grates echo with the screams of victims and souls alike. The streets shift and reform faster than you can even learn its layout. Devils live and walk amongst the smug, hazy districts, just as their lord watches from an ever-present tower that always sits far in plain view, but can never truly be reached. Today, we're going to continue on our way, delving deeper and deeper into the 9 layers of hell itself. On our last video, we covered Avernus, which is the first layer and where every soul that attempts to enter hell will always begin from. In that video, we covered all of the essential information that you need to understand hell itself, so I recommend watching that video if you haven't done so already. Now, for this video, we're entering Dis, the second layer of hell. The name Dis is given to both the layer and the city that sits on that layer. Proper, considering that the city is massive enough to basically be the entire layer. But before we begin, this video is brought to you by me. I am sponsoring myself to let you all know that Monster Classes 5 is officially out over at MrRex.store. With Monster Classes 5, you can play as a troll, as a gnoll, or as an earth elemental. These function as both your race and your full class, with features all the way up to level 20. And it also includes lore for each of the monsters and useful rollable tables designed to help you create the backstory for your new monstrous class. As an earth elemental, you have complete control over rock and stone, be that to manipulate the earth around you or to shape your very own form. You can grow large and become a tank, or focus your might right onto your fist to deal extra damage, or perhaps shrink in size and burrow through the ground. From creating gems right in your body to commanding the elements to assist you, the earth elemental is a powerful ally to have. The gnolls are strong, fast, and hard to pin down. With their feature Quick Step, gnolls can move outside of their turn in order to reposition themselves, a great skill to have in order to help isolate their targets. See, gnolls are powerful against enemies that are either surrounded or left completely separated from their friends. You can be part of Clan Felmaw and adopt warlock powers, you can be part of Clan Fangbond in order to hunt with a hyena companion, or Clan Swiftspear to be a martial powerhouse. And then, lastly, the trolls. They are nearly unkillable. Their legendary regeneration prevents them from dying, unless they sustain acid or fire damage, of course. This they use to their benefit, using their feature Frenzied Attacks to deal extra damage with their strikes at the cost of taking some of that damage as well. And when a troll is below half of their hit points or lower, they enter a berserk mode that makes them even more formidable. And check out Monster Classes 5 at MrRex.store. The link is in the video description. Thank you all so much for the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, back onto the video. There are 2 ways to enter the second layer of hell, as we described it in our last video, and you can either fall into it, usually by dropping down the edges of mountains across Avernus, or you can find the path that leads to it near the lair of Tiamat, the Queen of Evil Dragons, whose servants guard the entrance. The Avishai, which are her servants that patrol the passage, are not too interested in necessarily preventing creatures from entering into the second layer, other than stopping demons, of course, as you can imagine, but they do make a general effort to dissuade those that they feel don't belong. These mostly includes easily intimidated planar travelers or those that are not able to bribe them for passage. You will not find it uncommon to have one of these Abishai merely demand from 400 to 800 gold pieces to be granted entrance, usually in the form of gems. Now, the passage itself is difficult to describe because we're dealing with multiple locations that are theoretically infinite, but also do have entrances and exits that both exist in time and space. The trail passes through the ring of mountains that surround the city of Dis, and over time you will see the city far off in the distance as you walk it. However, it doesn't matter how much you walk it, you will never actually get close to the city. The passage looks like a blasted land, with spurs of iron that jut out from the ground that makes it difficult to traverse and see through. Flying is impossible as it always attracts the attention of the Avishai, who are in constant lookout for demons. This is the case both outside of the city and in the city itself. Those who fly are accosted by the Avishai and sometimes even attacked until the travelers are eventually forced to land on the ground and properly apologize. Now, to find the entrance to the city, you have to find a series of roads that populate the area. The roads are made from skulls, and they twist and turn across the jagged landscape as it makes its way over to the city. At times, the road turns into bridges that span large chasms, which reveals that the road itself is many feet deep and entirely composed of more and more skulls. And again, the only way to actually get to the city is by very strictly only walking through this very specific road. Quote, "No matter how long it takes to reach Dis, the entrance always comes as a sudden break in reality. The walls loom larger and larger, then suddenly the traveler has moved past them and is surrounded by ominously looming structures amid maze-like streets." End quote. The spikes of iron around the Blasted Lands are basically the same structure as many of the walls that surround the city of Dis. So before you know it, you will find yourself inside of the city amidst the bustling streets without necessarily knowing how you got so deep into it in the first place, and without having an easy way to retrace your steps back out. Now, the city itself is described as having a perpetual ash-filled green sky and being filled with gray smoke that covers most of the streets. It has many names, such as the City of Pain or the Burning City of Iron, but all in all, the name Dis describes it well, as it essentially is the whole of the layer. Now, the city holds several purposes, though many of them are technically unofficial. The city mines, smelts, crafts, and overall produces a lot of the iron tools, weapons, and armors that are used in the Nine Hells and, of course, in the Blood War. A lot of the schematics for the Infernal engines, as well as much of their production, also happen to be crafted and created within the city. The city also houses a lot of the captured from the Blood War, whether we're talking about zealot paladins that journeyed into Avernus in order to fight devils or demons alike, or errant adventurers that got way too big for their bridges and were captured in Avernus. Sometimes when people or souls are kidnapped from other realms, they are also brought here to be ransomed to their living relatives. When mortals, petitioners, or any other kind of non-devil breaks a law in hell and must be punished, they are also generally sent here for that punishment. Lastly, in a way, the city of Dis also forms as a barrier between the battle-torn fields of Avernus and the rest of the Nine Hells, a wall that keeps the two neatly separated, so to speak. Now, unlike the Bronze Citadel in Avernus, which is constructed primarily as a fortress to fight against demons, the way that the city of Dis is constructed bears no obvious purpose or practical structure, I should say. That is because the city is constantly reconstructed. See, the souls of evil people that make it into hell after they die, who we will call petitioners from now on, are made to construct and deconstruct parts of the city with no rhyme or reason, other than potentially as a form of punishment, I suppose. The punishment in this case being forced to spend endless time laboring in pain to construct a wall or a building, only to be made to tear it apart to construct a street in its place. Because of this, the layout of the city is in constant flux, but further, the magic of the realm also shifts the landscape and moves districts and locations within it seemingly at random. This is what makes the city impossible to chart. Devils simply teleport wherever they want to go in the city, while the rest must contend with either paying devils for guidance or risk getting forever lost in the streets. The environment in the city is uncomfortably hot, and the iron which makes the walls and the streets of the city conduct this heat even further, as it can often be seen even colored red from how hot they are. The walls in particular are dangerous to even touch. Those that do are burned sharp enough to produce screaming pain, which is one of the reasons why you can always hear screams of pain all across the city. Travelers must wear padded clothing and layered shoes to be able to withstand the touch of the iron, which ironically makes them even hotter under so much clothing. There are districts in the city that do cater to outsiders, and those tend to have rugs and, all kinds of coverings on the walls and floors, which alleviate this problem of not having to touch the actual iron, but there is nothing that can be done about the general hotness of the area. Now, the city is of course filled with devils, and you can find all kinds of devils in here. However, by sheer number, the majority that you'll find are either Avishai, Lemures, Spinnegans, and Imps. Many of the important generals of the Blood War also have residences here, as well as important devils from all across the Nine Hells. And their houses take on the form of grand manors that are spread out about the city. The streets are filled with crowds, which host markets and bazaars where creatures from all over the multiverse can meet and trade with one another. In particular, outsiders come here to buy and sell things that they might find difficult to trade for in other more normal locations, whether they are trading in souls, evil magic, slaves, or anything of the sort. Unscrupulous mercenaries also ply their trade here, selling their services to perform awful acts for any devil that requires it and of course is willing to pay for it. Now, when it comes to hell itself, you will have a hard time finding a place more, let's say, welcoming than the city of Dis, though it is certainly not too welcoming either. Those that travel here can barter and trade, and the powers that be will allow you to do so, but the second that you break a law, you will be consigned to suffer the consequences in its prisons, likely for all time. Good outsiders must also be in constant watch from temptation, as imps and other devils will do their best to corrupt them if they can, to seduce them or tempt them to commit evil acts that will sour their soul and damn them to stay in hell for all eternity. Of course, for the corruption of the soul, the acts committed must be willful and without being forced, so there won't generally be any, aggression by the devils in this aspect, but that insidious nature is still worth being prepared for. Now, one such place where the good are corrupted is called the Garden of Delights. Quote, "Behind the walls of sandstone lies the Garden of Delights. It seems like an oasis of pleasure amid the oppressive heat of Dis. Beautiful women stand at the gates, ready to collect an exorbitant entry fee from would-be patrons. Inside, pleasures of the flesh are readily available, as are refreshing beverages and sumptuous meals. However, the garden is nothing but the illusion of a bound Ifrit putting in its 1001 days of service to a diabolic master. While all the customers' needs seem to be met, in fact, they are eating and drinking nothing at all. Due to the nature of this fact only becomes apparent when the garden is left behind. Many a patron has starved to death amid the illusion of grand feasts and rivers of wine." End quote. Now, this place is so intoxicating that many a zealot paladin is made to relinquish its oath just to stay for longer. Some of the illusions tempt its patrons into performing sexually deviant acts that mar their souls forever. Other patrons might just fall in love with one or more of the hostesses, who seduces them into performing small but incremental acts of evil. Regardless, in the end, once the individual's soul is properly corrupted, they are left to either simply starve to death amidst the illusion of food, or are betrayed and murdered by the very devils that seduced and corrupted them in the first place. Those who meet this fate are then reborn as petitioners under the command of the Spater, the Lord of the Second and the ruler of the city, who in turn makes them work in the city for all eternity. The Spater lives in a structure called the Iron Tower, which is theoretically meant to exist at the very center of the city. Now, I say theoretically because, again, we're dealing with locations that are meant to be technically infinite, but also because the city is in constant flux and its layout tends to defy reason. Now, how does this apply in practice? Well, it doesn't matter where you are in the city, you will always be able to see the tower in the distance. But, more shockingly so, is that it actually doesn't even matter which direction you're looking at, the tower will always be in front of you in the backdrop of the city. So, like a green screen placed behind buildings of the city in the horizon, the tower never moves and is always there. In fact, it is described that the tower looks as if it is merely a few blocks away, but never seems to actually get close when you travel in its direction. Devils, as always, can simply just teleport into the tower if they want to, but the rest can't quite do so, which is of course designed on purpose in order to keep the tower away from those that do not belong in it. There is, however, a trick to getting into the tower. See, the magic of the plane basically prevents creatures from purposefully traveling to the tower or to accidentally stumble upon it when they did not intend to, or something along those lines. The exact nature of the binding that wards it from intrusion is not really known, though whatever it is, some creatures appear to have ingeniously found a way around it. Those who either successfully manage to clear their heads completely or close their eyes and blind themselves and then travel in the direction of the tower will eventually find themselves at its gate. It is believed that the city itself is bound to the mind of the Spader, who is himself an extraordinarily paranoid archdevil. Those who believe in such tales surmise that the Spader inherently seeks to confound its enemies and keep them away from him, which in turn passively molds the city to accomplish this task. The Spader famously never leaves his tower, as he is afraid of betrayal at all times, and instead runs the city and controls his armies through either intermediaries or through his most trusted servant, Titivilas, who basically manages most of the layer and has close to ultimate authority in it. The truth is that most of the Spader's fears actually are a ruse made by Titivilas. Quote, "Since gaining his position, Titivilas has convinced the Spader that countless plots are being hatched against him and that Asmodeus himself seeks to remove the Spader from power. In response, the Spader has withdrawn to his palace and left day-to-day decisions to Titivilas, while also authorizing him to answer and negotiate bargains with mortals who attempt to summon the Spader. Titivilas now represents his master and speaks with his voice, a turn of events that leads some to whisper that either Titivilas is the Spader in disguise, or that Titivilas has removed the Archduke and replaced him altogether." End quote. Titivilas is described as being fairly weak physically, but extremely cunning and a shrewd politician, usually always able to get his way by saying the right thing at the right time. Also, I'm being told that it might not be pronounced Titivilas, but actually Titivilas, but I guess I'm too late on that one, sorry. Anyways, now, the Tower of Iron itself is much like the city, and it changes from time to time, though in a much more obvious way than the city. In general, you can't really tell that the city is changing, other than by looking at the individual petitioners construct or deconstruct individual parts of it. The tower, however, is always rapidly changing right in front of your eyes, going from looking like a stubby, wide building to a tall tower to anything in between. The inside, however, behaves much like the city in that it changes more subtly. You can't usually tell it apart, though parts of the inside do also happen to look just like the city, to the point where one might actually have a hard time telling the inside from the tower to the outside of it. In fact, some believe that the tower leads to an even bigger city inside, but the truths of such rumors are for no one but the Spader himself to know. Now, the Spader is described as a humanoid with short horns, dark hair, a pointed tail, and hooves for legs, though sometimes only one of the legs is hooves. He's extremely intelligent and is said to have an unquenchable thirst for secrets. Those who make pacts with him usually do so in order to learn secrets or obtain all manner of hidden knowledge. Further, a lot of the ingenuity that is required in the construction of a bunch of the infernal weapons and armors that exist here in the Nine Hells come from the Spader, who holds those secrets for their construction, and he keeps those very close to the chest. Now, one of the Spader's most powerful secrets, which other archdevils are literally foaming at the mouth to learn, is the knowledge on how to squeeze divine essence out of those spirits that find themselves in a condition called anagnorisis. See, instead of recognizing the error of their ways and repent for their misdeeds before they are judged at their final hour, these souls instead come to achieve true understanding of the harm that they have caused and truly repent after they have already been sentenced to and have arrived in the 9 hells. These souls are potentially powerful because their anguish, which is required in order to squeeze divine essence from them, is innately larger than traditional souls, as they not only suffer for themselves in their pain, but also have an empathy to suffer for others. Now, how to squeeze this extra juice of agony is not something that is known to most devils. But apparently the Spader has a very interesting secret. The city holds many streets where these specters in anagnorisis moan and wail in utter despair, just as a special collection of magical rods basically absorbs large amounts of divine essence from them. Other archdukes are willing to pay small fortunes for any information regarding knowledge of the secret to obtain such energies, but of course, the Spader is not bound to release them anytime soon. We will end the video with this interesting factoid about the city as well. You might find it interesting that it is in fact in the city of Dis where all of the lawful evil gods always go to when they are first created. If a lawful evil person dies and is later prayed to enough to become a deity, that individual is moved to the city of Dis when they are transformed into that deity. Otherwise, if enough people begin creating the image of a new lawful evil god that didn't already exist, that god is then just simply created from scratch by the divine power of all the prayers created here in the city. The god appears in the street called God Street, where they instantly begin the process of terraforming their immediate area into one that conforms to the respective ethos or theme. This area then becomes their divine realm, which exists within the city like a district or a building. The area could take on the shape of a grand cathedral, or a skull-shaped cave, or a swampy jungle, or anything that the god desires, but they almost always have very defined borders or markers that form its area, since lesser deities do not have the power to create infinite spaces. These gods are effectively bound here and cannot leave for as long as they have a lesser deific status, which means that unless they can gather followers of believers in more than 1 or 2 worlds, they're limited to the city of Dis. God's Street cannot be accessed normally as no streets intersect with it. It can normally be found only by creatures who have some form of connection to the divine, usually because they are clerics or paladins, and even then it can only happen by accident. Otherwise, a specific god would have to invite you or summon you for you to be able to enter and find God Street. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. It is unfortunate that we do not have a lot more information on the city because it all seems just really interesting, but if you were interested, there is actually an adventure in Planescape that passes by the city, which is called The Fires of Dis. You might be interested in checking it out if you like the concept of the layer. Again, it's a 2nd edition Planescape adventure. I can probably put a link in the description to the drive-through RPG if I can find it there for you guys. But yeah, be sure to check out MrRex.store for all of my D&D PDFs. Every purchase supports me and the channel and keeps the lights going. So thank you all so much again for watching the video and for your support. And I will see you all next time.